I became a CEO taking my boss's place and saw a porn video on my work computer of him fucking my wife. Be me, Alex. Always believed that attention to detail is the key to success. It's what makes me good at my job as a real estate agent at Pinnacle Properties, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. Wake up every day grateful for the stability this career has brought me and the unexpected joy it's added to my life. It's not just about the properties or the commissions. This job led me to Laura, my wife and partner in every sense of the word, met at a real estate convention 5 years ago. Both eager young agents looking to make our mark in the industry. Still remember how she confidently strode up to me after a seminar on market trends, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm as she challenged one of the speaker's points. "Did you catch that bit about the shift in suburban demographics?" she asked. Didn't even bother with a hello. I think he's underestimating the impact of remote work on housing preferences. Immediately captivated, not just by her insight, but by her passion. Ended up talking for hours, missing the next 2 seminars, debated market forecasts, and shared our experiences in the field. By the end of the convention, knew I'd met someone special. Our relationship blossomed quickly, fueled by our shared love for real estate and the thrill of closing deals. Within a year, we were married. Shortly after, we both landed jobs at Pinnacle Properties. Working together seemed like a dream come true. Could carpool to work, share lunch breaks, understand each other's daily struggles intimately. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm that I cherished. Weekdays filled with property viewings, client meetings, and paperwork. Took pride in my meticulous approach, always ensuring every detail was perfect before presenting a property to a client. Laura matched my dedication, her natural charm and sharp negotiation skills complementing my more analytical approach. Evenings and weekends were our time to unwind. Often pick up my guitar, a hobby I'd cultivated since college. Soothing sounds of acoustic melodies would fill our cozy apartment. Laura would prepare dinner, an incredible cook, always experimenting with new recipes that filled our home with tantalizing aromas. "Alex, come taste this sauce," she'd call from the kitchen. Set aside my guitar, the strings still humming. These moments of domestic bliss, simple as they were, meant the world to me. We'd sit at our small dining table sharing stories about our day, laughing over the eccentricities of clients and planning our future together. Our colleagues at Pinnacle often remarked on how well we worked together, both as a couple and as professionals. Known for our ability to tag team difficult clients, Laura's people skills softening them up and my attention to detail sealing the deal. Our boss, Mr. Thompson, frequently held us up as an example of ideal teamwork. "If every pair of agents worked like Alex and Laura," he'd say during staff meetings, "we'd dominate the entire real estate market in no time." These compliments always filled me with a sense of pride and accomplishment. Laura and I had built something special, both in our personal lives and our careers. We were the power couple of Pinnacle Properties, respected by our peers and trusted by our clients. As I reflect on these past few years, struck by how seamlessly Laura and I have woven our lives together. Our shared passion for real estate isn't just a job. It's the foundation upon which we've built our relationship. Every successful deal, every satisfied client feels like a shared victory, strengthening our bond. Looking ahead, I see nothing but potential. Laura and I have been discussing the possibility of starting our own agency someday. Leveraging the experience and connections we've made at Pinnacle, it's an exciting prospect, one that we often discuss late into the night. Our voices hushed but filled with enthusiasm as we plan our future. For now, though, I'm content with where we are. We have a good life, a strong marriage, and careers we both love. As I fall asleep each night with Laura by my side, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for the path that led me here. The world of real estate might be fast-paced and sometimes cutthroat, but with Laura, I've found my home. Little do I know that this foundation I've built my life upon is about to be shaken to its very core. But for now, in this moment, life is good, and I'm happy. The first cracks in my perfect world appeared so subtly that I almost missed them. Started with small changes in Laura's behavior. Changes that, in retrospect, should have set off alarm bells. At the time, dismissed as nothing more than the natural ebb and flow of a busy life, Laura began working later, often not coming home until well after dark. At first, didn't think much of it. Real estate can be demanding. Sometimes you have to put in extra hours to close a big deal. I'd experienced those late nights myself, so I understood. "Just wrapping up some paperwork, honey," she'd say when I called to check on her. "Don't wait up." Trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? We'd built our life on a foundation of honesty and shared dreams. The thought that she might be lying never crossed my mind, but as the late nights became more frequent, couldn't help but notice other changes. Our evening conversations grew shorter, Laura often retreating to her phone, smiling at messages I couldn't see. Work stuff, she'd explain dismissively when I asked. And again, I believed her. After all, we were in the same business. I knew how demanding it could be. Yet it was more than just the late nights and the distraction. There was a subtle shift in the air between us, an almost imperceptible cooling of the warmth we'd always shared. Laura's kisses became perfunctory, her embraces brief and somehow hollow. The passionate discussions about real estate trends and future plans that once filled our evenings grew scarce. Tried to rationalize it. We were both busy, climbing the corporate ladder at Pinnacle Properties. Success often comes at a price, I told myself. But the nagging feeling that something wasn't right persisted, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. Then came the day that changed everything. The day I saw Laura's hairpin in my boss's office. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Had a meeting scheduled with Mr. Thompson to discuss a new development project. Knocked on his office door, but there was no answer. Assuming he was running late, decided to wait inside. As I settled into one of the chairs facing his desk, something caught my eye. There, nestled among the papers and files, was a familiar glint of silver. My heart skipped a beat as I leaned closer, hoping I was mistaken. But there was no doubt. It was Laura's hairpin. This wasn't just any hairpin. It was a distinctive piece. An antique silver clip adorned with a small pearl. Had belonged to Laura's grandmother. She wore it every day, considering it her lucky charm. I remembered her putting it on that very morning, securing her blonde hair in a neat bun before we left for work. The sight of it in Mr. Thompson's office sent a chill down my spine. What was Laura's most prized possession doing here? My mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and picked up the hairpin. It felt heavy in my palm, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to face. Closed my fist around it, the metal edges digging into my skin, as if trying to carve the truth into my flesh. Just then, heard footsteps approaching. In a panic, shoved the hairpin into my pocket and tried to compose myself. Mr. Thompson entered, all smiles and apologies for being late. Went through the meeting in a daze, my thoughts a whirlwind of questions and doubts. That evening, watched Laura as she prepared for bed, my eyes fixed on her hair. The familiar silver clip was back in place, as if it had never left. Had she noticed its absence? Had she been worried about losing it? There was no sign of distress or relief on her face, just the usual tired smile she'd been wearing lately. "Everything okay, Alex?" she asked, catching my gaze in the mirror. "You're awfully quiet tonight." Forced a smile. "Just tired," I lied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Big day at work." She nodded, accepting my explanation without question. As she slipped into bed beside me, felt a distance between us that seemed insurmountable. The warmth of her body next to mine, once a source of comfort, now felt like a cruel deception. Sleep eluded me that night. Lay awake, replaying every interaction between Laura and Mr. Thompson that I could remember. Had there been lingering glances I'd missed? Touches that lasted a fraction too long? Jokes that held hidden meanings? As the first light of dawn crept through our bedroom window, made a decision. Couldn't confront Laura or Mr. Thompson without more evidence. Needed to be sure before I risked destroying everything we'd built. And so began my covert investigation. At work, started paying closer attention to Laura's movements, noting when she disappeared for long periods or came back from lunch later than usual. Listened more carefully to office gossip, hoping to catch a stray comment that might confirm my suspicions. But it was like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. The more I looked, the less I seemed to see. Laura's behavior at the office was impeccable. Professional, friendly, but never crossing any lines that I could detect. Yet the image of that hairpin on Mr. Thompson's desk haunted me. It was a constant reminder that something was amiss. A loose thread that threatened to unravel the entire fabric of my life if I pulled on it too hard. As the days turned into weeks, felt myself changing. The easygoing, trusting Alex was replaced by a hypervigilant, suspicious version of myself that I hardly recognized. Hated feeling this way, but couldn't shake the gnawing doubt that had taken root in my heart. Knew I was at a crossroads. Could continue down this path of suspicion and mistrust, potentially destroying my marriage and my career in the process, or I could choose to trust Laura, to believe that there was an innocent explanation for everything. But as I stood at this juncture, torn between trust and doubt, couldn't help but feel that regardless of which path I chose, nothing would ever be the same again. The foundation of my life had been shaken, and I was left to wonder if it could ever be truly stable again. The weight of suspicion is a heavy burden to bear. As days turned into weeks, Found myself constantly on edge, analyzing every word, every gesture, every absence. The man I once was, trusting, open-hearted, seemed like a distant memory. In his place stood someone I barely recognized, vigilant, paranoid, and increasingly isolated. Determined to find the truth, began observing Laura more closely at work. Started arriving at the office earlier and leaving later, all under the guise of taking on more projects. In reality, was creating opportunities to watch Laura's comings and goings without arousing suspicion. One morning, as I pretended to be engrossed in paperwork, overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Mr. Thompson was discussing an upcoming business trip with a group of investors. Nothing unusual there, except for one crucial detail. "We'll be heading to the Maldives next month," he said, his voice carrying that unmistakable tone of smug satisfaction. "It's the perfect place to seal the deal and celebrate our success." Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't have caught my attention. But as one of the investors asked about the details, Mr. Thompson dropped a bombshell. "Oh, and Laura will be joining us. Her expertise will be invaluable in closing this deal." Felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Laura? On a trip to the Maldives with Mr. Thompson? My mind raced with questions. Why hadn't she mentioned this to me? And more importantly, why would our boss choose Laura over other, more senior employees for such an important trip? Tried to rationalize it. Laura was good at her job. Exceptional, even. It made sense that Mr. Thompson would want her expertise on such a crucial deal. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered that there might be more to it than that. Over the next few days, found myself listening in on more conversations, always on high alert for any mention of the Maldives trip. What I heard only deepened my suspicions. "Lucky Laura," overheard one of our colleagues say during a coffee break. "A week in paradise while the rest of us are stuck here in the city." "Well, you know how it is," another replied with a knowing smirk. "Some people just have a way of getting ahead." The implication was clear, and it made my stomach churn. Were these just jealous colleagues spreading gossip? Or was there truth to their insinuations? Wanted desperately to confront Laura, to demand answers. But every time I worked up the courage, found myself hesitating. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just a terrible misunderstanding? The thought of accusing her without concrete evidence filled me with dread. So instead, turned my attention to Mr. Thompson. Started paying closer attention to his interactions with Laura. Noticed small things. The way his eyes lingered on her during meetings. How he always seemed to find reasons to stop by her desk. The inside jokes they shared that left me feeling like an outsider. One afternoon, decided to take a risk. Under the pretense of discussing a client, casually brought up the Maldives trip to Mr. Thompson. "I heard about the big investor meeting coming up," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Sounds like an amazing opportunity." Mr. Thompson's face lit up. "Oh, it's going to be spectacular, Alex. This could be the biggest deal Pinnacle Properties has ever seen." Nodded, then added as casually as I could manage, "And I hear Laura's going to be part of the team. That must be exciting for her." For a split second, saw something flicker across Mr. Thompson's face. Surprise? Guilt? But it was gone so quickly I couldn't be sure. "Ah, yes," he said, his tone suddenly more guarded. "Laura's expertise will be crucial for this deal. We're lucky to have her on the team." The conversation moved on to other topics, but my mind was reeling. There was something off about Mr. Thompson's reaction, something that didn't sit right with me. As I left his office, felt a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, and a deep gnawing fear that my worst suspicions might be true. That evening, arrived home later than usual, my mind still churning with the day's events. Laura was already there, curled up on the couch with her laptop. "Hey," she said, looking up as I entered. "I was starting to worry. Everything okay?" Forced to smile. "Just a busy day at the office. How about you? Anything new?" Watched her carefully as I asked, searching for any sign of discomfort or evasion, but Laura just shrugged. Same old," she replied, turning her attention back to her laptop. "You know how it is." I did know, or at least I thought I did. But now, standing in our living room, looking at the woman I had promised to love and trust for the rest of my life, I wasn't sure I knew anything anymore. As I headed to the shower, hoping the hot water would wash away some of my anxiety, a new resolve formed in my mind. Couldn't go on like this, caught in a limbo of suspicion and doubt. Needed answers, and I was going to get them, one way or another. Little did I know. My determination to uncover the truth was about to lead me down a path that would change everything. The foundations of my life, my marriage, my career, my very sense of self, were about to be shaken to the core. And as I stood on the precipice of this unknown future, I couldn't help but wonder, was I ready for the truth no matter how painful it might be? The tension in our home had become palpable, a thick, invisible fog that seemed to seep into every corner. Tonight, as I stepped through the front door, the silence hit me like a physical force. The warm, inviting atmosphere that once greeted me after a long day at work had been replaced by a cold, sterile emptiness. Found Laura in the kitchen, half-heartedly stirring a pot on the stove. The aroma that filled the air was a far cry from the tantalizing scents that used to emanate from her culinary creations. As I approached, could see that she was reheating last night's pasta, a meal that had been mediocre the first time around. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "How was your day?" Laura turned, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, you know, the usual," she replied, her tone flat. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes." Nodded, watching as she mechanically stirred the pasta. This scene was so different from our earlier days, when she would excitedly tell me about a new recipe she was trying or ask about my day with genuine interest. Now it felt like we were just going through the motions. Two actors poorly playing the roles of a happily married couple. As we sat down to eat, the silence between us stretched uncomfortably. Twirled the pasta around my fork, noticing how the noodles had become mushy and the sauce had separated, leaving an oily sheen on the surface. It was a far cry from the delicious meals Laura once lovingly prepared. Took a bite, the bland taste matching the colorless atmosphere surrounding us. Despite its lackluster flavor, forced myself to swallow and mumbled, "It's good, thanks." Laura glanced up, a flicker of something. Surprise? Disappointment? Crossing her face. "You don't have to pretend, Alex," she said softly. "I know it's not great. I just didn't have the energy to cook something new tonight." Wanted to reassure her, to say it didn't matter, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, just nodded and continued eating, each tasteless bite a reminder of how far we'd drifted apart. As we ate in silence, could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on us. Laura's eyes darted around the room, never quite meeting mine. Her fork pushed the pasta around her plate more than it delivered food to her mouth. The tension was unbearable, like a rubber band stretched to its limit, ready to snap at any moment. Finally, Laura broke the silence. "Is everything okay, Alex?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been different lately, distant." The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. Had to suppress a bitter laugh. Me, distant? When she was the one staying late at work? The one whose smiles were reserved for her phone screen rather than for me? Set my fork down, the clatter against the plate sounding unnaturally loud in our quiet kitchen. "I could ask you the same thing, Laura," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. Or was it fear? "What do you mean?" Took a deep breath, knowing that my next words could change everything. "I've noticed changes, Laura. The late nights at work, the constant messages on your phone, the way you've been pulling away from me, and then there's the Maldives trip." Laura's face paled, her fork clattering to her plate. "How did you know about that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "So it's true then?" I pressed, feeling a surge of anger and hurt. "You were going to go on a trip with Mr. Thompson and not even tell me?" Laura's eyes darted away, focusing on a point somewhere over my shoulder. "It's not what you think, Alex. It's a business trip, that's all. I was going to tell you, I didn't know how." Scoffed, pushing my plate away. "A business trip to the Maldives with our boss? Come on, Laura, do you really expect me to believe that?" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "What exactly are you accusing me of, Alex?" Her voice had taken on a defensive edge. "I don't know, Laura. You tell me. What am I supposed to think when my wife is sneaking around planning secret trips with her boss?" Laura's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not sneaking around. It's work, Alex. You know how important this deal is for the company. Mr. Thompson chose me because of my skills, not because of whatever it is you're implying." Stood up too, my hands clenched at my sides. "And what about the hairpin? Your grandmother's hairpin that I found in his office?" For a moment, Laura looked genuinely confused. Then, realization dawned on her face, quickly replaced by a mask of indifference. "I must have dropped it when I was in a meeting with him. It doesn't mean anything." We stood there, on opposite sides of the table, the remains of our cold, tasteless dinner between us. A fitting metaphor for the state of our relationship. The woman across from me, with her defensive posture and evasive answers, seemed like a stranger. Where was the Laura I had fallen in love with? the one who used to share everything with me, whose laughter used to fill our home. What happened to us, Laura? I asked, my anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. When did we stop being partners? When did we start keeping secrets from each other? Laura's face softened for a moment, a flicker of the woman I knew shining through. But then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by a look of cold determination. Maybe, she said, her voice low and controlled. We've both changed, Alex. Maybe we want different things now. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table for support. What are you saying, Laura? She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I'm saying that maybe we need to take a step back, reassess things. I think I need some space. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Space? After everything we'd been through, everything we'd built together, she wanted space? I'm going to stay with my mother in Philadelphia for a while, Laura continued, not meeting my eyes. I think it'll be good for both of us to have some time to think. Watched, feeling numb, as she walked out of the kitchen. A few minutes later, heard the sound of a suitcase being dragged across the floor, then the front door opening and closing. And just like that, I was alone in our apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life I thought was unshakable. The half-eaten plates of cold pasta sat on the table, a testament to the conversation that had just upended my world. As the reality of what had just happened began to sink in, slumped back into my chair, my head in my hands. How had we gotten here? And more importantly, where did we go from here? The confrontation I had been both dreading and longing for had finally happened. But instead of providing clarity, it had left me with more questions than answers. As the night stretched on, sat there in the silent kitchen, wondering if this was the beginning of the end, or if there was still hope for us to find our way back to each other. The days following Laura's departure blurred together in a haze of confusion and pain. Our apartment, once a haven of shared dreams and laughter, now felt cavernous and empty. Every corner held a memory, each one a bittersweet reminder of what we'd had and what we might have lost. One evening, as I sat on my couch, found myself absently twisting my wedding ring. The smooth gold band that had once felt like a comforting presence now seemed to mock me with its promises of forever. Slipped it off, holding it up to the light. The inscription inside caught my eye. Forever and always, A and J. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Forever and always. How naive we'd been. Just then, a knock at the door startled me out of my reverie. Quickly slid the ring back on. A reflex action that surprised even me. Opening the door, found my friend and colleague, Mike, standing there with a concerned look on his face. Hey, Alex, he said, his eyes scanning my disheveled appearance. Thought you might want some company. And maybe a drink? Nodded, grateful for the distraction, as Mike made his way to the kitchen to grab some beers, caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The man staring back at me was a stranger, unshaven, eyes hollow, a shell of my former self. We settled on the couch, the TV murmuring in the background. Mike, bless him, didn't push for conversation. He just sat there, a solid presence offering silent support. As the evening wore on, felt the need to eat something. Hadn't had a proper meal since Laura left. Opening the fridge, found the container of her bland pasta, the last meal we'd shared before everything fell apart. Brought it to the living room, popping the lid off. The smell that wafted up was far from appetizing. Mike wrinkled his nose. What is that? It smells off? Stared at the congealed mass of noodles and separated sauce. It was a fitting metaphor for my marriage. What was once nourishing had turned sour and unpalatable. It's nothing, I muttered. Just some leftover pasta. Mike reached for the container. Look, man, whatever that is, it's not fit for consumption anymore. Let me throw it out for you. Something inside me snapped. All the pain, confusion, and anger of the past few days came rushing to the surface. Without thinking, grabbed the container from Mike's hands and strode to the window. You want to throw it out? I yelled, my voice cracking with emotion. Fine, let's throw it out. With that, flung the entire container out the open window. Mike jumped up, shock written all over his face. Alex, what the hell, man? We both rushed to the window, looking down at the sidewalk below. The container had burst open on impact, splattering its contents across the pavement. A couple of passers-by jumped back, staring up at our window in confusion and anger. As the reality of what I'd just done sank in, felt my knees give way, slumped to the floor, my back against the wall, and buried my face in my hands. I'm sorry, I mumbled, more to myself than to Mike. I'm so sorry. Mike sat down beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. It's okay, Alex. It's going to be okay. But would it? As I sat there on the floor of my apartment, the smell of spoiled pasta drifting up from the street below, I wasn't so sure. The man I'd been, the happily married, successful real estate agent, seemed like a distant memory. In his place was this broken, angry person I hardly recognized. She's gone, Mike, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Laura's gone, and I don't know if she's coming back. Mike squeezed my shoulder. Give it time, Alex. These things, they're complicated. You and Laura, you've been through a lot together. That doesn't just disappear overnight. Nodded, wanting to believe him, but finding it hard to summon any hope. The weight of my wedding ring felt heavier than ever, a constant reminder of promises made and potentially broken. As Mike helped me clean up and made sure I was okay before leaving, couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. The confrontation with Laura had left me with more questions than answers, and the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. That night, as I lay in our too-large bed, staring at the empty space beside me, realized that the real challenge was just beginning. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about figuring out who I was without Laura, and whether the foundation we'd built our life on was strong enough to withstand this storm. As I drifted off into a fitful sleep, one thought kept circling in my mind. Where do we go from here? And more importantly, would Laura and I be walking that path together? Or had we already started down separate roads? Weeks passed since Laura's departure, each day a battle to maintain normalcy. Throw myself into work, hoping the familiar grind will distract from personal chaos. Pinnacle Properties offers no refuge from my troubles. Weekly team meeting, Laura's empty chair a stark reminder of the void in my life. Mr. Thompson swaggers in, confidence grating against my dejected state. Announces big opportunity, the Westbrook Development Project. Perk up at the mention, it's a massive undertaking. Could put Pinnacle on the map as a major commercial real estate player. Exactly the challenge I need to lose myself in. Spend days researching, analyzing market trends, studying similar developments. Reach out to industry contacts, gathering insights. Work is exhausting but exhilarating. A welcome distraction. Develop comprehensive strategy for Westbrook deal. Innovative mixed-use concept could set our proposal apart. Excitement builds as I prepare to present to Mr. Thompson. Hope this could be my professional lifeline. Enter his office for scheduled meeting, immediately sense something's off. Mr. Thompson barely looks up, his usual warmth replaced by cool detachment. Ah, Alex, he says dismissively. What can I do for you? Thrown off but press on, launch into my presentation. Outline the mixed-use concept, explain potential benefits. As I speak, feel passion reigniting, momentarily forgetting personal troubles. Finish pitch. Mr. Thompson's reaction deflates me. Instead of enthusiasm, he nods impassively. Interesting ideas, Alex, but we're going in a different direction. Gut punch feeling as he outlines his new strategy. It's my idea, barely modified, presented as his own. Sit there, stunned as he talks. Notice Laura's hairpin still on his desk, mocking me. Meeting ends with me assigned a minor role, far below my usual responsibility. Leave office reeling, ideas stolen and sidelined on biggest deal of the year. Following weeks, watch helplessly as Mr. Thompson presents my strategy. Investors impressed, praising his vision and creativity. Each compliment twists the knife deeper. Overhear him in break room, boasting about his sudden inspiration. Grip coffee mug, knuckles white with anger. Unfairness overwhelming, personal and professional life both in shambles. Find myself increasingly marginalized as project progresses. Opinions dismissed, contributions overlooked. Become a ghost in the halls of Pinnacle Properties. Parallels between personal and professional life painfully clear. Laura's absence and career slipping away, twin voids growing larger. Late one evening, alone in the office, reach a crossroads. Continue being trampled or take a stand? Stare at photo of Laura and me, make a decision. Can't control my marriage, but can take charge of my career. Begin formulating plan? Maybe time to look elsewhere? Have industry contacts, solid reputation, now a proven track record thanks to Thompson's theft. Pack up? Feeling hope for first time in weeks? Road ahead difficult, but finally have direction. Pause at Pinnacle logo, once my second home, now feels like a cage. Time for a change, mutter as I step into elevator. Doors close, weight lifts from shoulders. Uncertain future, but ready to face it head on. Whatever comes next, starting by reclaiming self-respect and integrity. Elevator descends, old life at Pinnacle with it. Time to write new chapter. No longer a victim of circumstances. Step out stronger, more determined, ready to fight for what I deserve. In career and personal life, the new Alex emerges. The decision to take control of my life was easier made than executed. As I walked into Pinnacle Properties the next morning, my resignation letter felt like a lead weight in my pocket. The familiar buzz of the office, once comforting, now seemed oppressive. Colleagues greeted me with their usual nods and smiles, unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. Made my way to my desk, my eyes inadvertently drawn to Laura's empty workspace. Her absence still stung, a constant reminder of the personal and professional upheaval I was facing. Shaking off the melancholy, booted up my computer and began to draft my resignation letter. The words flowed easily, fueled by weeks of pent-up frustration and disappointment. Outlined my reasons for leaving, careful to remain professional while making it clear that I felt my contributions were no longer valued. As I typed the final sentence, a strange mix of relief and anxiety washed over me. Just as I was about to print the letter, my phone rang. It was Mr. Thompson's secretary, requesting my immediate presence in his office. With a deep breath, stood up, straightening my tie and squaring my shoulders. Whatever this was about, I was determined to face it with dignity. As I entered Mr. Thompson's office, was surprised to find not just my boss, but also a group of men in expensive suits. The investors behind the Westbrook development project. Mr. Thompson's face was a mask of forced calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "Ah, Alex," he said, his voice overly jovial. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing the Westbrook project, and these gentlemen had some questions I thought you might be able to answer." Nodded, confused but ready to engage. As the investors began to ask detailed questions about the project's strategy, found myself automatically slipping into the role I knew best. The dedicated, knowledgeable real estate agent explained the nuances of the mixed-use concept, the market research that supported our approach, and the potential long-term benefits for both the investors and the community. As I spoke, noticed the investors exchanging impressed glances. Mr. Thompson, on the other hand, looked increasingly uncomfortable. When I finished my impromptu presentation, one of the investors turned to Mr. Thompson with a puzzled expression. "Tom," he said, "this is excellent work, but it seems quite different from what you presented to us last week. Have there been significant changes to the strategy?" Mr. Thompson's face paled. "Well, you see," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. In that moment, saw an opportunity, not just to reclaim my work, but to stand up for myself and my principles. Taking a deep breath, decided to take a risk. "Actually, gentlemen," I said, my heart pounding but my voice steady, "the strategy I just outlined is the original proposal I developed for this project. It seems there may have been some miscommunication about its origin." The room fell silent. The investors looked between me and Mr. Thompson, their expressions a mix of confusion and dawning realization. Mr. Thompson's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Alex," he hissed, "I think you're mistaken. Perhaps we should discuss this in private." But one of the investors cut him off. "Is this true, Tom? Did you present someone else's work as your own?" The tension in the room was palpable. Stood my ground, meeting Mr. Thompson's furious gaze with a calm determination I didn't entirely feel. For a moment, thought he might deny it, might try to discredit me. But as he looked around the room, seeing the suspicion on the investors' faces, his shoulders sagged in defeat. "I may have borrowed some of Alex's ideas," he admitted reluctantly. "But the final presentation was a team effort." "It doesn't sound like much of a team effort to me," another investor interjected. He turned to me, his expression serious. "Alex, was this your work or not?" Took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "Yes, sir," I said firmly. "The strategy, the research, the projections, they were all part of my original proposal for the Westbrook project." The room erupted in a flurry of angry voices. The investors demanded explanations, their trust in Mr. Thompson clearly shaken. As the chaos unfolded, felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I had stood up for myself and my work. As the meeting dissolved into heated discussions about the future of the project and Mr. Thompson's leadership, quietly excused myself. Returning to my desk, retrieved my resignation letter, now feeling somewhat obsolete in light of recent events. Was about to head home, my head spinning from the morning's events, when Mr. Jameson, one of the senior partners, approached me. "Alex," he said, his voice grave, "I'd like to speak with you in private, if you have a moment." Nodding, followed him to his office, unsure of what to expect. As we sat down, Mr. Jameson fixed me with a penetrating stare. "I want you to know that we take what happened this morning very seriously," he began. "Mr. Thompson's actions are completely unacceptable and do not reflect the values of Pinnacle Properties." Nodded, waiting for him to continue. "We'd like to offer you Mr. Thompson's position," he said, catching me completely off guard. "Your work on the Westbrook project was exemplary, and your integrity in bringing this situation to light is exactly the kind of leadership we need." For a moment, was speechless. This was more than I could have hoped for, a vindication of my work and a recognition of my value to the company. But as the initial shock wore off, found myself hesitating. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Jameson," I said slowly, "but I need some time to think about it. Recent events, both personal and professional, have given me a lot to consider." Mr. Jameson nodded understandingly. "Of course, take the time you need, but know that we value you here, Alex. We'd hate to lose you." As I left his office, my mind was reeling. The day had taken a turn I never could have anticipated. My work had been recognized, my integrity rewarded, and a new opportunity lay before me. Yet as I packed up my things to head home, couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. Stepping out of the elevator into the lobby was so lost in thought that I almost collided with someone entering the building. Looking up to apologize, I froze. It was Laura. She looked as shocked to see me as I was to see her. For a moment, we just stood there, the air between us thick with unspoken words and lingering hurt. "Alex," she said finally, her voice soft. I heard what happened with Mr. Thompson and the project." Nodded, unsure of what to say. The professional triumph of the morning seemed insignificant in the face of our personal turmoil. "I'm proud of you," Laura continued, her eyes meeting mine, "for standing up for yourself, for your work. It's one of the things I've always admired about you." Her words hit me like a physical force. In that moment, all the anger, hurt, and confusion of the past weeks came rushing back, but along with it came a flood of memories. The good times, the laughter, the love we had shared. "Laura," I began, but she held up a hand, stopping me. "I know we have a lot to talk about," she said, "a lot to work through, but seeing you today, hearing what you did, it reminded me of the man I fell in love with, the man I still love." My heart raced at her words. Was this a chance at reconciliation? Or just another complication in an already complex situation? As we stood there in the lobby, the bustle of the workday continuing around us, realized that this was another crossroads. The professional challenges I had faced were just the beginning. Now, I had to decide if I was ready to fight for my marriage with the same determination I had shown in fighting for my career. Looking into Laura's eyes, seeing the mix of hope and uncertainty there, knew that whatever came next would be the true test. The climax of our conflict was yet to come, but for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to face it head-on. "We do have a lot to talk about," I agreed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Maybe we could start with dinner tonight?" Laura's smile, small but genuine, was like a ray of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "I'd like that," she said softly. As we made plans to meet later, couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, full of hard conversations and painful truths. But as I watched Laura walk away, knew that the fight, for my career, for my marriage, for the life I wanted, was far from over. And this time I was ready for it. The weeks following my confrontation with Mr. Thompson and unexpected encounter with Laura were a whirlwind of change. My promotion to Mr. Thompson's former position brought new challenges and responsibilities, but also a sense of vindication. The Westbrook development project, now under my direct supervision, was progressing smoothly, with the investors expressing renewed confidence in Pinnacle Properties. As I settled into my new role, couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, both personal and professional, that I had experienced had pushed me to my limits. But it had also forced me to confront my own strengths and weaknesses, to fight for what I believed in. One quiet evening, as I was reviewing surveillance footage from my new office, a security measure I had implemented after the incident with Mr. Thompson, stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. There, on the grainy video, I saw Laura entering Mr. Thompson's office late one night, weeks before our confrontation. They embraced in a way that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All this time, I had been holding on to hope, believing that there might have been a misunderstanding, that we could work things out. But seeing the evidence of her betrayal with my own eyes shattered that illusion. Sat in my darkened office, the surveillance footage still playing on my computer screen, feeling a strange mix of pain and clarity. It was as if the final piece of a puzzle had fallen into place, bringing the whole picture into sharp focus. The next morning, called my lawyer and instructed him to draw up divorce papers. It was time to face the truth and move forward, no matter how painful it might be. A few days later, Laura reached out, asking to meet. Despite the turmoil in my heart, I agreed. We arranged to meet at a small park near our old apartment, a place that held many happy memories for us. As I approached our usual bench, saw Laura already seated, her blonde hair catching the late afternoon sunlight. For a moment, was struck by her beauty, remembering all the reasons I had fallen in love with her. But then the image from the surveillance footage flashed in my mind, stealing my resolve. "Alex," Laura said, standing as I approached. Her voice was soft, tinged with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Thank you for meeting me." Nodded, taking a seat beside her. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Laura began, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "About us, about everything that's happened. I know I hurt you, Alex. I know I made mistakes. But I believe we can work through this. We've been through so much together." As she spoke, found myself studying her face, searching for signs of the woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew. But all I could see was the image from that surveillance footage, playing on a loop in my mind. "Laura," I interrupted gently. "I've been doing a lot of thinking too." Stood up, needing to move, to put some physical distance between us. Laura watched me, confusion and concern etched on her face. "I thought we could work things out too," I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my heart. I wanted to believe that what we had was strong enough to overcome anything, but trailed off, unsure how to proceed. "How do you tell someone that you've seen irrefutable proof of their betrayal?" Laura stood up, moving towards me. "But what, Alex? Whatever it is, we can face it together. I love you. I want to make this work." Her words, once so precious to me, now rang hollow. Took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do next. "I saw the surveillance footage, Laura," I said quietly. She froze, her face paling. What footage?" "From my office. I saw you with Mr. Thompson. I saw everything." The color drained from Laura's face as the implications of my words sank in. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. Turned away, unable to bear the sight of her distress despite everything. My eyes fell on a glint of metal on the ground, my wedding ring. I hadn't even realized I'd been fidgeting with it, let alone that I'd dropped it. Laura followed my gaze, her eyes widening as she spotted the ring. In a sudden movement, she dropped to her knees, reaching for the discarded symbol of our marriage. "Alex, please!" she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "We can fix this! Let me show you that we can make this work!" She picked up the ring, holding it out to me like an offering, a promise of redemption. For a moment, I was tempted. The memory of our happier days, of the love we had shared, pulled at my heart. Laura began to slide the ring onto my finger, her touch achingly familiar. But as the cool metal touched my skin, reality came crashing back, jerked my hand away abruptly, the ring falling back to the ground with a soft thud. "No, Laura," I said, my voice firm despite the pain in my chest. "We can't fix this. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together." Reaching into my jacket pocket, pulled out the envelope containing the divorce papers. Laura's eyes widened as she recognized what it was, her face crumpling in despair. "I'm sorry, Laura," I said, holding out the envelope. "But this is how it has to be." Laura stood slowly, her legs shaky. She reached for the envelope with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "Alex, please," she whispered. "Don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I love you." Felt my resolve wavering, the urge to comfort her, to try one more time, nearly overwhelming. But then I remembered the surveillance footage, the weeks of lies and deception, the trust that had been irreparably broken. "I loved you too, Laura," I said softly. "But love isn't always enough. Sometimes we have to love ourselves enough to walk away." With those words, turned and walked away, leaving Laura standing there with the divorce papers in her hands. Each step felt like it was tearing me apart, but I knew it was necessary. It was time to close this chapter of my life and begin anew. As I reached the edge of the park, paused, looking back one last time. Laura was still standing where I'd left her, the envelope clutched to her chest, her figure small and lonely in the fading light. For a moment I almost turned back, But then, I straightened my shoulders and continued on my way. The coming days and weeks wouldn't be easy. There would be paperwork to file, assets to divide, and a life to rebuild. But as I walked away from the park, away from Laura and the life we had shared, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. I had faced betrayal, both personal and professional, and come out stronger. I had fought for my principles, for my work, and for my self-respect. And now, I was choosing to fight for my future. A future that, while uncertain, held the promise of new beginnings. As I reached my car, caught sight of my reflection in the window. The man looking back at me wasn't the same one who had discovered his wife's hairpin in his boss's office all those weeks ago. This man was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Got into my car and started the engine. The hustle and bustle of the city fading into the background as I drove. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt ready to face it. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had also been the catalyst for my transformation. As I navigated the city streets, heading towards my new apartment and my new life, I realized that sometimes it's only when we lose everything that we're free to become who we're truly meant to be. The sun was setting as I pulled into my new neighborhood, casting long shadows across the unfamiliar streets. As I parked and made my way to my apartment, felt a mix of emotions, sadness for what I had lost, but also excitement for what lay ahead. Stepping into my new home, was struck by the emptiness, the blank canvas that lay before me. But rather than feeling lonely, felt a surge of possibility. This space, this life, was mine to shape as I saw fit. Walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Laura was probably reading through the divorce papers. Mr. Thompson was facing the consequences of his actions. And life at Pinnacle Properties was continuing without me at the helm. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. I had weathered the storm of betrayal and come out the other side. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the journey. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, made a promise to myself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same courage and integrity that had brought me through this ordeal. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead become the foundation for a stronger, more authentic version of myself. And with that thought, turned away from the window and began to unpack, ready to write the next chapter of my life. A chapter defined not by betrayal, but by resilience, growth, and the endless possibilities that come with new beginnings.